The vast, cold emptiness of space stretched before the research vessel Starlight, like an infinite black canvas. Captain Junwoo Park stood at the main observation deck, his sharp eyes scanning the holographic displays that flickered with data, streams. Beside him, Science Officer Yoonbi Kim adjusted her neural interface, her fingers dancing across translucent screens. A faint blip caught their attention. Something massive and ancient drifted silently in the Crimson Nebula's outer regions. The ship's advanced sensors began analyzing the object, a human spacecraft so old it seemed more like a relic than a functional vessel. "Proximity scan," Junwoo commanded, his voice calm but curious. The ship's AI responded instantly. Holographic images materialized, revealing a damaged human vessel from centuries ago. Its hull was scarred with ancient impact marks, telling stories of battles long forgotten. Most intriguing was the single life sign detected within a cryo sleep chamber. Yoonbi leaned closer. One survivor, perfectly preserved. The cryopod was unlike anything in their current technological archives. It was a marvel of early 22nd century human engineering, robust, simple yet remarkably effective. Layers of radiation shielding, quantum stabilization systems, and primitive but ingenious preservation mechanisms protected its single occupant. "Shall we retrieve it?" Yoonbi asked, her scientific curiosity burning bright. Junwoo hesitated. Their mission was research, exploration, but protocol demanded caution when encountering unknown biological entities. Humans were considered an extinct species, their civilization having collapsed centuries ago during the Great Resource Wars. The research team gathered, each member wearing specialized environmental suits designed to handle potential biological contamination. Their excitement was palpable. A genuine human specimen could unlock centuries of lost knowledge. Specialized robotic arms extended from the Starlight, carefully detaching the cryopod from the abandoned spacecraft. Each movement was calculated, precise. The pod itself seemed to resist, as if guarding its precious cargo. As the pod was transferred into the ship's quarantine chamber, subtle warning signals began flickering across the system monitors. Something about this preservation unit was different. It wasn't just a typical cryo-sleep chamber. It was a specialized military-grade containment unit. Yoonbi's initial scans revealed fascinating details. The occupant was male, approximately 38 years old. Military records were partially encrypted, but fragments suggested he was more than an ordinary soldier. Strategic deployment markers, advanced training certifications, psychological evaluation notes hinted at something deeper. "Prepare revival protocols," Junwoo instructed the medical team. The chamber began its slow, carefully managed revival sequence. Temperature gradually increased. Cellular regeneration systems activated. Neurological monitors started tracking brain activity. Something felt different. The other researchers sensed it too. This wasn't just another scientific specimen. This felt like something more significant. Minutes passed. The cryopod's external shell began to retract, revealing its occupant. A man with sharp features, muscular build, and eyes that seemed to hold centuries of untold stories, slowly opened. David Rodriguez. That was the name encoded in his preservation records. The moment his eyes opened, the entire research team felt an inexplicable shift in the ship's atmosphere. It wasn't fear, it wasn't excitement. It was something more profound, a sense that everything they understood about humans was about to change. "Where am I?" David asked, his voice clear and precise, speaking their language with shocking fluency. No one answered immediately. They were too stunned by the unexpected complexity of this simple question. The real story was just beginning. The medical bay hummed with tension as David Rodriguez sat upright, his eyes scanning the room with calculated precision. The alien medical team, led by Dr. Hyun Kim, watched his every movement, their multiple eyes blinking in synchronized patterns of curiosity and caution. David's muscles moved with surprising fluidity for someone who had been in cryosleep for centuries. He flexed his fingers, tested his joints, and observed the alien medical equipment with a calm that surprised everyone present. Most recovered specimens would show signs of disorientation or panic. He showed neither. Water, he said simply, using their language with an accent that felt both familiar and unsettling. Dr. Kim hesitated before providing a transparent liquid in a standard medical container. David's hand moved smoothly, taking the container and analyzing its contents before drinking. Even this simple action felt like a calculated assessment. Captain Junwoo watched from an observation window, his communication device recording every moment. Something about this human felt different, not just recovered, but prepared. The medical scanners continued their continuous analysis. David's cellular structure showed remarkable adaptability. Nanite recovery systems within his body were working, at levels far beyond what the aliens expected. Each scan revealed layers of complexity that challenged everything they knew about human biology. "How long was I asleep?" David asked, his question direct and calm. Dr. Kim checked the historical records. "Approximately 327 standard planetary cycles," she responded, expecting some form of shock or emotional response. David simply nodded. No surprise, no emotional breakdown, just acknowledgement. The research team exchanged subtle communication signals. This was not a typical revival. This was something else entirely. Subtle details emerged during initial medical assessments. David's neural pathways showed enhanced connectivity. His muscle memory remained intact. Small scars on his body told stories of previous combat or medical interventions. Each mark was like a hidden chapter of human history. "I was part of the Earth Expeditionary Force," David mentioned casually, as if discussing a routine work assignment. "Strategic Reconnaissance Unit." The aliens listened, their translation devices working overtime to capture every nuance of his speech. David spoke about his past with a detachment that felt both professional and slightly unsettling. He described complex military operations, technological challenges, and survival strategies as if recounting a routine day's work. Junwoo noticed something peculiar. David wasn't just answering questions, he was subtly gathering information. Every response was measured, every observation calculated. The medical bay's environmental controls seemed to adjust unconsciously around David. He moved naturally, as if understanding the alien technology without explicit explanation. When Dr. Kim adjusted a medical scanner, David's hand almost instinctively moved to help, showing a level of technological intuition that surprised everyone. "Your species is interesting," David said, looking directly at Dr. Kim. The statement felt more like an assessment than a casual observation. Hours passed. Standard medical protocols continued, but something fundamental had changed. The aliens were no longer studying a human specimen. Instead, they found themselves being studied by this unexpected guest. As night cycles began on the research vessel, David requested access to their historical and technological databases. The request was so casual, so matter-of-fact, that it took the crew several moments to realize the potential implications. What David didn't know was that his arrival was about to change everything. The aliens who thought they were conducting a routine scientific investigation were about to discover that humans were far more complex than any of their extensive research had ever suggested. The real awakening was just beginning. The research vessel's common area became David's unexpected classroom. Crew members gathered, pretending to work while secretly listening to his conversations. He spoke about human history not as a defeated civilization, but as a complex, resilient species. Dr. Yunbi Kim noticed something strange first. David wasn't just sharing information. He was teaching, manipulating, and subtly probing their cultural understanding. "Survival is an art," David explained one evening, discussing Earth's final decades. His words carried weight beyond simple storytelling. Each narrative revealed layers of human psychological complexity that made the alien crew increasingly uncomfortable. He spoke about resource wars, not with sadness, but with a clinical understanding of human adaptation, how communities transformed challenges into opportunities, how limited resources drove incredible technological innovations. The aliens listened, their communication devices struggling to capture the nuanced emotional subtext. Captain Junwoo observed these interactions carefully. David never raised his voice, never showed aggression. Yet something in his calm demeanor suggested deep strategic thinking. During mealtimes, David demonstrated another surprising skill. He understood alien dietary requirements instantly, engaging each crew member with personalized conversation that made them feel uniquely understood. He remembered minor details about individual crew members, personal preferences, professional interests, subtle cultural references. The ship's psychological analysis systems began generating complex reports. David's interaction patterns didn't match any known diplomatic or communication models. He was simultaneously respectful and subtly influential. Communication logs showed something remarkable. In just 3 standard days, David had established deeper connections with the crew than most diplomatic missions achieved in months. He didn't manipulate through force or direct confrontation. Instead, he listened, reflected, and responded with precise emotional intelligence. Crew dynamics started shifting subtly. Junior researchers began questioning established protocols. Senior officers found themselves discussing hypothetical scenarios David had casually introduced. His stories weren't just narratives. They were strategic lessons embedded in seemingly innocent conversations. One evening, during a standard navigational review, David made an offhand comment about human exploration strategies. His description of early space missions wasn't just historical. It contained implicit leadership lessons that made the navigation team reconsider their entire operational approach. Dr. Hyun, the ship's primary psychologist, became increasingly fascinated. David's psychological profile defied standard categorization. He showed traits of a military strategist, a diplomat, a researcher, and a survivor, all simultaneously. The aliens began realizing something profound. David wasn't just a recovered human. He was a complex psychological system designed to assess, adapt, and potentially influence. When asked about his personal experiences, David shared carefully selected stories. Each narrative contained multiple layers of meaning. A story about surviving a resource shortage became a lesson in teamwork. A description of a technological challenge revealed insights about problem solving. Junwoo noticed the crew's gradual transformation. They were no longer just studying David. They were learning from him. His presence challenged their understanding of human civilization, not through confrontation, but through intelligent, nuanced interaction. The ship's artificial intelligence began generating increasingly complex behavioral prediction models. David's influence couldn't be measured through traditional analytical frameworks. He was changing the environment simply by existing within it. As ship cycles passed, the initial scientific curiosity transformed into something more complex. The aliens were no longer certain who was studying whom. David had turned a potential research subject into an active participant in their collective understanding. Something fundamental was changing, and nobody on the Starlight was quite prepared for what would happen next. The psychological layers were just beginning to unfold. The ship's training simulation chamber hummed with anticipation. What was meant to be a routine tactical exercise became something entirely unexpected when David volunteered to participate. Captain Junwoo designed a complex strategic scenario, a multi-dimensional conflict simulation that had historically challenged even their most advanced tactical officers. The test was designed to be nearly impossible, with multiple simultaneous threat vectors and rapidly changing environmental conditions. David listened to the simulation parameters with unusual calm. No nervousness, no visible tension, just quiet observation. The simulation began. Holographic battle spaces erupted around him. Complex networks of planetary defenses, mobile attack units, and rapidly shifting resource management challenges. Most participants typically struggled within minutes. The alien tactical team watched, expecting David to fail quickly. Something extraordinary happened. David didn't just navigate the simulation. He reimagined it. Where alien tactical thinking followed predictable logic patterns, he introduced unpredictable, almost chaotic strategic elements. He used limited resources in ways that defied conventional military understanding. Smaller units became complex adaptive networks. Defensive positions transformed into offensive opportunities. Each decision challenged the fundamental assumptions of alien strategic thinking. The simulation's artificial intelligence began adjusting difficulty levels, introducing increasingly complex challenges. David adapted faster. His human brain processed information differently, seeing patterns where algorithmic thinking saw only chaos. Junwoo watched in silent amazement. David wasn't just playing the game. He was teaching a masterclass in strategic thinking. When the simulation ended, the results were shocking. David had not only survived, but had achieved victory conditions that were mathematically considered impossible. The tactical team stood in stunned silence. "Interesting scenario," David commented casually, as if discussing a mild recreational activity. Dr. Yunbi's analysis systems were working overtime. David's decision-making process showed remarkable flexibility. He didn't follow predetermined, strategic doctrines. Instead, he created strategies in real time, adapting instantaneously to changing conditions. The challenge wasn't just about beating a simulation, it was about demonstrating a fundamentally different approach to problem-solving. Crew members began discussing the simulation in hushed conversations. Some felt inspired, others felt threatened. David had inadvertently exposed the limitations in their own strategic thinking. Junwoo requested a private review of the simulation logs. Each review revealed new layers of complexity in David's approach. He wasn't just using military strategy. He was applying principles of psychology, resource management, and innovative thinking simultaneously. The ship's atmosphere changed. What began as a scientific research mission now felt like something more profound. David had transformed from a recovered specimen into a living lesson about human potential. During a follow-up discussion, David shared insights about human military history. He spoke about conflicts not as battles, but as complex social and psychological interactions. His perspective challenged everything the alien crew understood about warfare and strategic engagement. "Conflict is rarely about resources," David explained. "It's about understanding the underlying human motivations." The tactical team found themselves taking notes not as researchers but as students. As ship cycles passed, the initial curiosity transformed into something more complex. The aliens were discovering that David represented more than an individual. He was a window into a civilization they had previously misunderstood. The challenge wasn't just about strategic simulation, it was about understanding a fundamentally different approach to existence, and they were just beginning to comprehend its implications. The ship's internal systems began changing subtly. No one could pinpoint exactly when or how, but David's presence was transforming everything. Crew members who once followed strict hierarchical protocols now questioned established procedures. Junior researchers started proposing innovative solutions. Senior officers found their traditional decision-making processes challenged by new perspectives. Captain Junwoo realized the transformation first. David hadn't used force or direct manipulation. He had simply existed, sharing insights that rewrote their understanding of strategic thinking. Communication channels became more fluid. Information flow changed. Where once there were rigid communication protocols, now there were open discussions, collaborative problem-solving, and a newfound curiosity about alternative approaches. The ship's artificial intelligence began showing unexpected behavioral patterns. It started learning differently, incorporating the adaptive strategies David had demonstrated during the tactical simulations. Traditional algorithmic thinking gave way to more flexible, context-aware decision-making. David never claimed control. He didn't need to. His influence spread like a quiet virus through the ship's cultural and operational systems. During a routine maintenance meeting, he casually mentioned a human concept called collective intelligence. The crew listened, fascinated. His description of how human teams solved complex problems by breaking traditional hierarchical barriers resonated deeply. Junwoo noticed the change in his own leadership approach. He found himself asking more questions, encouraging more open dialogue. The rigid command structure was softening, becoming more adaptive. The ship's medical bay showed similar transformations. Dr. Hune began incorporating more holistic approaches to crew health, inspired by David's discussions about human resilience and psychological adaptation. Communication logs revealed something remarkable. Crew members were now speaking more openly, sharing concerns, and collaborating in ways that defied their previous operational models. David had introduced a new way of thinking without explicitly teaching anything. One evening, during a standard navigation review, the team discovered an innovative route that cut travel time by 37%. The solution came from a junior navigation assistant who had been listening to David's stories about human exploration. The transformation wasn't just operational, it was philosophical. Alien leadership began receiving unusual reports. The Starlight was no longer just a research vessel. It had become a living experiment in cultural and operational adaptation. David remained calm throughout. He didn't celebrate or draw attention to the changes. He simply continued sharing stories, answering questions, and existing as a living example of human potential. The ship's communication systems started showing increased efficiency. Problem-solving times reduced. Creative solutions increased. The crew's collective intelligence was evolving. Junwoo realized they had done more than revive a human. They had introduced a completely different operational paradigm to their entire research mission. As ship cycles passed, the initial scientific curiosity transformed into something profound. The aliens were no longer studying a human specimen. They were learning from an entirely different approach to existence. David's presence had become a catalyst, not through force or direct instruction, but through the simple act of sharing perspective. The final transmission from the Starlight would later be described as a moment of fundamental transformation, not a conquest, not a conflict, but a quiet, profound reimagining of what was possible. One human had changed everything.